Okay, we're live. We're going to read Pretty in Pink by David Reynolds. It is a story of about 3,000 words, and every pony tries to cope as the laughter is suddenly torn out from their lives. It's rated teen. Pretty in Pink by David Reynolds. It was wintertime, but any holiday cheer would have been a distasteful irony. There was nothing to be happy about. Something was missing. A facet of life in Ponyville, something I had always taken for granted. I had never even considered that one day I might be without it. This facet took the form of a keen and bubbly mare who always wore a smile, and made a point to share that smile with every pony. But she no longer wore a smile. Her eyes were closed, and she was almost frowning. It was unnatural for her. When I spun the thoughts around in my mind, I didn't like the conclusions I drew. There would be no more parties, there would be no more giggling, and in fact, Ponyville would be very lucky if any pony was ever happy again. My heart clouded over from the snowstorm of emotion. After the procession, I sat in the library for what felt like hours, just sitting there, staring at the floor, avoiding thinking at all costs. At that point, thinking would have been rather masochistic if not suicidal. There was too much to think about, and no good could have been drawn from thinking about it. Not even Rainbow Dash could clear the cloud that hung over Ponyville. But try as I might to rid my mind of all semblance of thought, I couldn't keep the gears from churning. My mind wasn't conditioned to a lack of thought. I gave up, and allowed myself to process it all.
It was all so sudden.
This first inevitable thought entered my mind, and I let it run.
One day she was some giggly ball of fun who I'd spent nearly every day of my life in Ponyville with. Then the next day she was...
I couldn't think any further. I pushed all of my thoughts away as the tears began to flow. I lay flat on the floor, with my teeth gritted, sobbing. I remained there for the rest of the evening barely conscious, and I hardly noticed when Spike gently lifted my head up to put a pillow underneath. I only half noticed when a minute later he lay a blanket over me.
I should have noticed sooner,
was the last thought that crossed my mind before sleep gripped me. The next morning I awoke feeling dead inside. The chill of winter weather had penetrated my heart. I lay in that spot for several hours that morning. My body seemed to think that if I didn't do anything that day, perhaps the day just wouldn't happen at all. But it was wishful thinking. That much became clear when a soft tap on the door grabbed my attention. Then a voice followed.
Twi, can I come in?
I lay still where I was for a lack of energy, willpower, or any semblance of motivation. So in my stead, Spike opened the door. Applejack wandered in and took a seat next to me.
I just want to talk, that's all. I've been getting a mite restless and thought you might be talking it over might do us both some good.
I grunted in acknowledgement.
There's just no pony saw it coming. She must have known. She didn't tell any pony, and I can only wonder why.
I grunted again in acknowledgement. Applejack seemed frustrated at this.
Well, I might help you, honestly, all I'd want to do is talk here, and you can hardly put in a word in or two.
Applejack got up and walked back outside. A moment later I heard Rarity's voice. The two of them were talking. A second later, Rarity came in. Rarity came in.
Who is playing
Come
Rarity?
on.
You're Benjamin. You're doing Rarity.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Oops.
A second later, Rarity came in.
Sorry, I'm trying to find that part. I was
Derp.
Oh,
Look, a moose.
second. Okay. Come on, get up.
Why?
I barely mumbled the question.
We're not going to let you sit here and rot from your own depression. Some fresh air will do you good.
I still refused to get up, so Rarity cast a levitation spell.
Come on, we're leaving.
Against my will, I was magically dragged outside.
Where are you taking me?
I again mumbled. Rarity, instead of replying, sighed.
You still have friends left, Twilight. Being one pony short does not justify neglecting the rest. We all need to cope, but if any coping is to be done, we need to do it do it. We need you to be there with us. And you know what else, Twilight.
What?
I asked, hardly caring about humoring her anyway.
You need us there with you. That's a fact.
I was silent for the rest of the trip. The loneliness of the cold blinded me to my companions. Sugar Cube Corner was a bittersweet sight. Even more bittersweet was the fact that the rest of my friends stood there, but the frizzy mane bouncing blur of pink was not amongst them. I closed my eyes and tried to shut it all out.
Twilight, you need to stand up now.
I heard Rarity's voice say. I scoffed silently. Easy enough for the independent one to say.
Twi, I can honestly say I didn't expect you to crumble so easy like.
Of course, the farm pony would know all about keeping one's composure. Twilight, come on! She'd want us to move on. She'd hate to see us suffer for her. Yeah, Rainbow Dash. The pony that was never faced by anything. She would say that.
Be strong, Twilight.
My eyes opened wide. The last one was Fluttershy. Even Fluttershy, the most emotionally fragile pony I knew, was standing up tall. Even Fluttershy, the frail and tender Pegasus who was afraid of everything, was looking her emotions in the eye and staring them down, daring to consume them. Even Fluttershy. I realized right then and there that I was an absolute mess. I closed my eyes tight and gritted my teeth again, preparing for the tears. Rarity released her levitation spell, and I fell to the ground with a light thud. With this, I was pulled away from my emotions for a moment by what I felt around me.
The ground.
I hadn't noticed earlier, but there was light snow on the ground.
Of course.
I thought.
It's winter. Winter.
The thought processed for a moment, after which I took a deep breath and stood up. Tears in my eyes, but a weak smile across my face.
Any pony want to go ice skating?
In the midst of icy despair, my heart began to thaw. We all found skates and picked out a good lake that had good solid ice. Rarity was absolutely right. The fresh air was like breathing in pure adrenaline. I felt awake. I felt aware. These tears had long since crusted over, and my eyes were dry. I felt like everything would be alright, and that the one who couldn't be here with us would be smiling down at us, knowing that we were doing just what she always wanted, what she always encouraged, having fun with each other. I was just as horrible at skating as I was the previous time, during my first winter experience. But this time, I was able to laugh at my mistakes. This time, I didn't have any goal to accomplish or task to complete. This time, trying was all that mattered. But there was still a fragment of that feeling at the pit of my stomach. I knew that my late friend would have wanted to be here with this. To be the one to show me how to skate. It still tore me up a bit that I didn't get the chance to do at least that. After an hour or so skating, and copious amounts of tear-ridden giggling, we all headed over to Sweet Apple Acres, where Applejack had a roaring fire going and apple pies baking in the oven.
Glad to see you come around, Twi.
Applejack commented as he poured cider for all of us.
I was worried about you.
I sipped the warm cider gingerly. The transition from cool, fresh air to warm, welcoming cider worked wonders on my mind.
Thanks, Applejack.
I paused for a moment to take another sip.
It was upsetting to me particularly. When I was just a filly, Princess Celestia told me I had more talents waiting to be uncovered. One of those talents was supposedly the ability to see the future. And so in the back of my mind this entire time, I've been wondering why that latent ability couldn't have surfaced sooner. If I had foreseen what was going to happen, I might have... Okay, maybe I couldn't have prevented it. But I could have made her last week's more enjoyable, more fun, more something, at least.
You know, Twilight,
Fluttershy cut in.
if you really feel bad about it, there's one thing you could do to get it off your mind.
Oh? And what's that?
You could talk to Nurse Redheart and ask her for the details. I'm sure she'll tell you what you want to know.
I mulled this over. It did seem like a good idea. There was the slightest hint of dread, but I ignored that. I finished my cider, partook in some apple pie, and thanked Applejack for everything before leaving to find Nurse Redheart's office. In my heart, the sun crept through the clouds.
So, what was the issue?
I asked Nurse Redheart. I almost wasn't sure she heard me. My voice was dry and cracked. I didn't expect it wanted me to talk, but in the back of my mind, I was terrified of what the answer might be. Nevertheless, Nurse Redheart responded a moment later with a sigh.
She came in about 2 years ago, asking about some symptoms she was having. Well, as it would turn out, she was very ill. I told her she had a year to live, and upon hearing this, she told me not to tell Only Pony until she was gone. That was winter of 2 years ago. But then, in the summer, a year and a half ago, she met you, and she became stronger again. I don't much specialize in the psychology, but I suspect your presence in her life gave her something to live for. Her heart was no longer beating for herself, but for some pony else. Twilight, I think the friendship you offered her prolonged her life greatly.
After this, Nurse Redheart paused, and her demeanor changed slightly. When she spoke again, there was an air of bitterness.
But then you changed, Twilight. You began to tire of her antics. You misinterpreted her desperate cry for help as hyperactivity and pretended not to notice. That upset her. She couldn't make you smile anymore, and if her friends weren't smiling, she had no reason to smile either. She lost her will to live because you passed her actions off as just her typical silliness. Twilight Sparkle, you killed Pinkie Pie.
I stepped back a pace in shock.
What are you saying?
You brought about the end of her life, plain and simple. By neglecting her, you failed to prolong her life, and so in essence, you killed her.
No, I never neglected her. I always appreciated her optimism and carefree attitude.
You took her for granted. You made her feel unappreciated and unloved. All that time you kept telling yourself, she's just being Pinkie Pie. You never bothered to understand why.
I had no response. I was completely taken aback by these accusations, but the worst part of it was that it all rang true. Before I could ponder this thought, however, Nurse Redheart continued.
Celestia's favorite student, huh? With the latent ability for foreseeing the future.
How do you know that?
If only you had seen it this time, you might have appreciated Pinkie Pie and undone the damage before it was too late.
She gave a shudder and began to change shape.
You killed her, Twilight Sparkle.
She grew taller, and her shadow enveloped the room.
You killed her, Twilight Sparkle.
Her face grew darker.
You killed her, Twilight Sparkle.
Her voice twisted into a demonic tone.
You killed her, Twilight Sparkle.
At that moment, I heard a distant voice. It sounded like Pinkie Pie saying, "Wake up, Twilight! Wake up!
You killed her, Twilight Sparkle.
Wake up, Twilight!
You killed her, Twilight Sparkle.
Wake up, Twilight!
You killed her, Twilight Sparkle.
Twilight, wake up!" I woke up with a start. It was no longer winter, but rather midsummer. I was rather confused, and it took me a moment to get my bearings. But at that moment, I was still working itself through, when I heard a pounding at the front door, and a subsequent blur of Pony zooming through it. "Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up!" Pinkie Boy was bouncing around the room excitedly. I blinked the drowsiness out of my eyes, and tried to comprehend what was going on.
It never happened.
I thought.
It was all a dream.
I inhaled steeply, and let out a difficult breath.
A dream, maybe, but definitely not fiction.
I thought it all through. There was nothing made up about our relationship, I realized. I had very much been taking Pinkie Pie for granted. I took that opportunity to make a change. Still a bit upset from the dream, I got up and walked over to Pinkie Pie. She seemed confused as I buried my face in her pink frizzy mane that only fell flat when her heart clouded over. I sighed.
I'm glad we met, and I'm glad we're friends.
Twilight? What's up? Did you have a scary dream?
Yeah, something like that.
I took a deep breath, but caught myself short when I felt Pinkie Pie give a slight tremble.
Pinky, are you feeling alright?
Yep, I'm super duper spectacular.
Are your pinky senses giving you any trouble?
Nope, they haven't acted up at all since Froggy Bottom Bog. Twilight, what's up?
No reason. You're sure you're okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. She shuddered again. She was lying. There was something wrong with her. And after a second, it all clicked.
Princess Celestia told me one day that I'd be able to see the future.
It wasn't a dream at all. It was a vision. Pinkie Pie was actually dying. Why else would she hide that she was ill? It all added up. I'd been given a second chance at this, an opportunity to make things right, and I wasn't going to let it slip by. The most important thing I realized was not to tell Pinkie Pie that I knew. Doing so would make her prolonged happiness that much more difficult to achieve. I needed to make sure that she knew she was appreciated, and I couldn't do that if she only thought I was doing this to make her happy. That just wouldn't work at all.
So, Pinky, what do we have going on today?
She grinned wildly. I have no clue! Let's go find out! I smiled weakly, and felt a pain of guilt that could only come from understanding. What she did to make her friends happy, and if they weren't having a good time, she couldn't either. We spent the day like we would have spent any other day, having fun with our friends. Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash were hanging out in the meadow, so we decided to join them for a while. Pinky, as it turned out, got along with Angel extremely well. I never realized how interesting a day in the meadow could be. Every time I had visited before, there were tasks to complete, issues to sort out. I never stopped to appreciate it. We stayed there past nightfall, and when Luna brought out the moon, we watched the fireflies light up the sky. Afterwards, I walked Pinkie Pie back to the Sugar Cube corner and said goodnight. Twilight, thanks for being there today. I had a great time.
Yeah, so did I.
Pinkie stifled a slight tremble. I pretended not to notice. The days passed like this, and each day Pinkie was just as lively as the previous day. Winter came, and I began to worry. This was the time of year I had seen in my dream. Before it was too late, I decided to make one last change. I stopped by the Sugar Cube corner one weekend.
Hey, Pinky, I have a favor to ask.
Yes, Twilight?
Would you mind showing me how to ice skate?
The pink pony's face lit up. Well, of course, Twilight. Right here. I'll go get my skates. The future I had seen before my eyes shattered. Winter came and passed. Pinkie Pie, though still showing a tremble now and then, was still bouncing around and having a good time. And every single day that passed with Pinkie Pie still alive and throwing parties, I counted as a little victory. Days turned into months, months turned into years. I counted every victory and I never forget a single one. I celebrated exactly 5,724 of these victories. That's 15 years, 7 months, a week and 2 days before Pinkie Pie finally threw her final party and drifted off into infinite sleep. At the procession, I stepped up to the altar and took a last look at my good friend. I shed a tear, but rather than holding bitterness in my heart, I held a smile on my face.
Goodbye, and thanks for being an awesome friend.